Hope your Friday is going well as we welcome you to our coverage of IndyCar from the South. This is the Children's of Alabama IndyCar Grand Prix, and boy, it feels good to have two races in 2 weekends and two very different tracks. Last weekend it was the Acura Grand Prix of Long Beach on those famed streets of Long Beach, California. Here we are here at one of the most beautiful natural terrain road courses that you've ever seen. The precinct here is just something else. Barber Motorsports Park, just stunning. The Augusta of motorsports. Lee Diffie, James Hinchcliffe and Dylan Welsh with you this afternoon on an 84-degree afternoon here in Birmingham, Alabama. Now, if you have been hiding under a rock since Wednesday and have not seen the IndyCar headlines, they're pretty big. They're pretty seismic. Yes, your eyes aren't deceiving you. This man here, Joseph Newgarden, this really is one of his 2 home races these days. He has been disqualified from the season opener, the Firestone Grand Prix of St. Petersburg. He is not the only one. His teammate, Scott McLaughlin's podium result also DQ'd, and fellow teammate and third-team Penske member Will Power, a loss of 10 championship points. Now, how and why? If this is the first time you're hearing it, well, this is the reason why. Are found to be in breach of IndyCar's push-to-pass regulations. Now, this wasn't discovered at St. Pete in Florida. It was discovered last weekend during morning warm-up on the streets of Long Beach. And IndyCar, once they found out about this, there was a little bit of an anomaly on how they found out about it. And when they did, they acted pretty swiftly. But it has been such a long time, folks, since we have seen an IndyCar winner stripped of his victory, that this has been quite seismic. It's really reverberated throughout IndyCar and around the motor racing world, especially when the owner of the series and the owner of this team, Roger Penske and his group, the uber successful group, whether it be championships or Indianapolis 500s, and based on just that decades-long history of success and integrity and following the rules, when you see, and it has been deemed that his team was outside the rules, it shocks us, right? It is quite shocking and stunning, and that's what happened on Wednesday when we saw that press release. James, as a driver, as a broadcaster, I know you were shocked. There is Tim Cindric, the president of Team Penske. You and I were in a meeting with him not that long ago for him to tell us his perspective. But IndyCar has dealt with it. IndyCar has dealt with it pretty swiftly, effectively. As far as the president of IndyCar, Jay Fry, is concerned, it's a matter closed. We've dealt with it. Let's move on. We've got a race to deal with this weekend. This guy here had a very emotional press conference. We'll get to that in just a moment, but first, your thoughts.
How long is this practice session,
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
This is one of the most extraordinary stories that I've seen in my days following the IndyCar Series, competing in the IndyCar Series, and now broadcasting for the IndyCar Series. Like you say, it's been 30 years since a win was stripped. There are often post-race technical, people falling afoul of the technical regulations and post-race inspections. Sometimes we've seen points deductions, sometimes fines. But to have a win stripped, it really shows that it was a pretty aggressive breach of the rules. Being able to use push-to-pass at a time in the race when it is banned, that makes sense. That makes sense why it's a harsh penalty. That is a very egregious breach of the regulations. How we got there is a complicated, convoluted, and complex story, which we will, over the course of the weekend, dive into and digest and try to explain. But yes, as you said, from a technical standpoint, the case is closed. IndyCar were alerted to a problem. As you said, Diff, very quickly dove into it, investigated, came to a conclusion, and issued a penalty. That'll happen in about 72 hours. So credit to them for getting it done quickly. Even though it seems like delayed because it's from a race 6 weeks ago, it really only came to light Sunday in Long Beach. So credit to the series for doing that. But just because it's technically closed from a points and penalty standpoint, it doesn't mean that the conversation's over, as there are a lot of feelings and emotions around the paddock about this situation.
And what we should say, too, is it was discovered at Long Beach in the warm-up when push-to-pass was disabled for the entire field, but the 310 Penske Chevrolet still had it, and it was active. And that's what alerted IndyCar.
That was the trigger to try to understand how their cars could still have active push-to-pass when it was essentially shut down for the field. IndyCar has, let's call it a master switch, the light switch. It either turns push-to-pass abilities on or off for the entire field. It was off in this moment. All three Penske cars were still able to use it. They looked into how that was an issue and why that had happened, and then decided to retroactively look back to the previous points race in St. Pete to see if that had been used outside of the definition of the rules, and it had in fact been used. Both Scott McLaughlin and Joseph Newgarden had hit the button during the first lap of a start or a restart, which it is supposed to be inactive. Will Power, though it was available in his car, did not actually hit the push-to-pass button during those times when it was supposed to be off. And this is the situation that has led to the penalty.
This topic is unlikely to go away anytime soon. The paddock is pretty hot, understandably so, and Newgarden spins.
Easy to do there at the top of the hill in 13, Diff. It's a blind corner. He's going to try to bump start it as he's rolling. He looks like he's kept it going there. We've seen many guys go around there just dropping two wheels over the curb there from the hill as the series goes red flag.
We were riding on board with him when this occurred, Hinch. Up and over the top of the hill. This is maximum. Like the G-forces, the compression before and then the lift and up and over there. And
this section of racetrack right here, 12-13, it's my favorite of the entire IndyCar calendar. You turn in a little bit blind to the left, down in the compression, then massively blind over the hill in 13. You have to just rely on your experience of where the car needs to be. You're so low in this race car, it's pointed at the sky. You can't see that exit curb until you're already on top of it. And it is so easy to just be a few inches too far over. And we've seen many cars end up, in honestly a much worse position than Joseph did. He spun, kept it off the wall, but we've seen a lot of cars have big contact on the top of turn 13 there. Through 12 and 13, up and over, the car gets light. You feel your stomach rise up like on a roller coaster, and then this never-ending 15-16 complex before the last corner as we see Agustin Canapino now. That looks like the exit of turn 1, entry to turn 2. You can see the tire marks, maybe just lost it there through turn 1.
One of the things that we heaped praise on this Argentinian driver for last year in his rookie year was the lack of mistakes. It was a pretty scrappy Long Beach Grand Prix for Augustine, and here he's brought out the red, and this is what happened. Down the hill, which is a lot steeper than it appears on television, loses it right at the bottom of turn 1, and up he goes, off track and heading uphill on the inside of turn 2.
Yeah, it all comes from that curb strike there, Diff. This is an incredibly quick corner, 5th gear in qualifying, and as I said, the entry's a little bit blind. You kind of lift before you can actually see that apex curb. You start your turn in, and if you turn in a little bit too early, you can just clock that curb, and it really upsets the race car at that speed. So this is something that is kind of common here. In the past, they've actually had a bright orange bollard that would stick up from the apex high enough that down the front straight, the driver could at least get a sense of where it was. I don't see that on the track now. They used to have one down in this 8-9 section as well. The problem is throughout the course of the race, usually somebody would bowl it over and leave it in the middle of the racetrack. So I think IndyCar made the decision to stop putting them there, but it does make turn 1 that little bit more of a challenge for these guys.
Because there is more familiarity now for Canapino, is he pushing the envelope a little bit harder?
I would think so. I would think just having that experience, being a little bit more comfortable. Now he's going back to all these racetracks. Of course, last year, most of them he's going to for the first time, bar a couple that he may have had a chance to test at. So yeah, you show up with a little higher degree of confidence, and we saw a great performance out of him in Long Beach, qualifying just a few hundredths shy of his teammate. Ultimately, that lap was deleted for a yellow flag infraction, I believe. But yeah, he's showing improved form and improved pace as you would expect for a second-year driver.
So we talk about the elevation and the undulation here at Barber Motorsports Park. Take a look at this, and take a look at the rise and fall and those key numbers. There is a lot of it here. This is like a roller coaster for the drivers. It is amazing, and it's one of those challenges for television to truly do the undulation justice, especially where Canapino went off. If you have a look at turn 1 and 2 there, and then the rise and fall. Here is the blind, turn 4. This is where the field were just brought undone several years ago on the opening lap. I mean, look at that. Maximum commitment there. Here's over the back where Joseph Newgarden spun earlier.
And this is important to know. You see the alternate start-finish line right here, the line across the track there. So for timing and scoring purposes, that's where your laps start and end in practice and qualifying. And that's noted and important to pay attention to as we get into qualifying tomorrow. Right before the alt-start finish line is always where we see those bundles of traffic, right? We see all the backing up, trying to find a gap. It's difficult here in Barber because the corner immediately preceding the alt-start finish line right here, turn 12 and 13, is a very fast section of racetrack. So you really want to be on the gas and carrying that speed through here. It's not like, say, Long Beach, where right before the all-star finish line is a 30-mile-an-hour hairpin. You can have a slow roll and then get a good exit. You really need to kind of get your momentum going coming out of that 11-10, or 10-11 rather, chicane. So it can be a bit messy here in qualifying. You know, again, we're going to have 27 cars in practice on a 2.3-mile racetrack. There's not a lot of room.
How about this guy, Scott Dixon? The PNC Bank Honda. Frustratingly, this track is one of those that has eluded him as far as victories is concerned. But don't worry, he'll get that taken care of. Might be this weekend, especially. You talk about last weekend at Long Beach, his 57th career victory. And look at that smile on the side of the car, because that smile was like that inside the helmet. We called it an improbable victory, and he agreed with that as cars roll after this second red flag. I mean, the master of going where others think that you can't. I mean, he is incredible. I asked him earlier today, I said, hey, there's Colton Herter getting into Joseph Newgarden. Quick reminder about that. But, you know, when the likes of Will Power and others were on exactly the same strategy as Dixon, and they were like, we had no idea how he was able to pull that off. Dixon did admit today that it was pretty gratifying and satisfying the way that he did it. He said, I have to say, that one did feel pretty good.
Look, Scott Dixon has done this time and time again as we take a brief look at his career here at Barber. 9 podiums, Lee, 6 of them second places, never managed to find his way to victory lane. But for the guy that's won 4 of the last 6 races going back to last year, maybe his odds are pretty good for this weekend to finally break the duck here. But as I was saying, there, so many times over this storied career have we seen Scott Dixon make magic happen on fuel numbers. That one was even remarkably impressive by Scott Dixon standards, to essentially put 15.5 seconds on Will Power on the exact same strategy over a stint. That is remarkable. He was a half second a lap faster while maintaining the same fuel number. And I mean, it's magical. There's really no other way there's no logic that goes into it. There's no science that can explain it. It's pure wizardry and magic at this point. So that definitely had to be a satisfying win for Scott.
46 minutes left in this first practice session here at the Children's of Alabama IndyCar Grand Prix. Second race in as many weekends. Really cool. The guy who was elevated to victor at the Firestone Grand Prix of St. Pete, Pato O'Ward, heads the timesheet at the moment from McLaughlin, and Grosjean has jumped up to third. Herter and Ericsson, as we say, good afternoon to Dylan Welsh. Dylan?
Hey, Diff. So just a few laps on track so far here, kind of in this abbreviated session, but Graham Rahal, you see him on screen, is already not too thrilled with the balance of his race car. Here with some recent radio.
Yeah, like turn 2, I just can't hold a tight apex at all because the front is inoperable. Yeah, copy that. 8 and 9, I mean, the front feels like it's not touching the ground.
So Graham coming off a tough week at Long Beach when he had potentially a good run that was kind of derailed by a late pit stop miscue, and another tough start to the weekend here as they try to get the balance on this 15 car figured out.
This is arguably the most physical racetrack on the IndyCar calendar, as we see Alex Rossi up in the turn 2-3 section making a little trip through the gravel. You're going to see a lot of that in practice, maybe in qualifying, maybe in the race as well. But just going back to his teammate for the weekend, Théo Pourchaire, just, again, the team very impressed enough to give him the call up to run here again at Barber, as we see all the gravel just flying out of the number 7 McLaren of Rossi.
Let's have a look at what happened to Alexander Rossi.
Again, do that blind turn one on the gas. And as you go uphill, the car gets so light as the track starts to fall away. The rear of the car so often just wants to step out on you. Alex keeping his hand straight to avoid spinning. And luckily that gravel trap ends and gives you a bit of grass to turn back. If that was gravel the whole way, he may have made it all the way to the Armco. But imagine no damage. The underbellies of these Indy cars are pretty robust from a little rocks.
Shovels out a bit of gravel there. Now, while you were talking about Théo Pourchaire and you mentioned F2, yes, the trail of breadcrumbs from Europe across the Atlantic to the US and IndyCar specifically continues. Here's another F2 graduate. This is Luca Giotto, who was a full-timer in the FIA F2 Championship for numerous years, and he's won a handful of races in F2 competition. He told me this morning it's been some 4 years since he was a full-time F2 competitor, but he finds himself in the Dale Coyne Racing 51, and he has come to a couple of IndyCar races just to watch, just to let some of the team owners know that he is around and available and would love to be in an IndyCar, Dylan, as we see the 60 off track of Felix Rosenqvist. But Dylan, Luca Giotto continues the long list of F2 graduates to come to IndyCar.
Yeah, and we talked last week about the kind of quick turnaround for Théo Pourchaire getting the call to get in the Arrow McLaren car. I spoke with Luca today, and he said he got confirmation on Monday, so 4 days ago, that he was racing. Flew from Italy to the Dale Coyne Racing shop on Tuesday to get just basically fitted in the car. And then, as you said, this weekend is his first time kind of back in a single-seater car in quite some time. So just trying to kind of get acclimated to the feel of that. He's been racing LMP2 sports cars in the European Le Mans series and you know, for the last couple of years. So just trying to get reacclimated with the feel of sitting in the center of the race car and understanding how to drive an Indy car. Good news for him is that he will be in action at the Indy GP in a couple of weeks as well. So he'll be able to get his feet wet here and then hopefully apply all he's learned in a couple of weeks when we go to Indianapolis.
He's got to go back to do a race in France in between now and then, as Felix Rosenqvist brings the Meyer Shank machine. Hinch, this is what happened.
Again, we said it, this 2-3 section, you're going to see a lot of guys caught out there. There's so much lap time to be gained here, Diff. That corner, it's two corners. They call it turn 2 and turn 3. You're in it for so long, and getting out of it is incredibly important because it's that run down to turn 5. So you do have to push the boundaries there. You need to roll as much speed as you can through without sacrificing the entry. But there's just never been a race car that I've driven that's happy and perfectly balanced through that corner. It's just such a setup nightmare for the teams and such a delicate balance for the drivers. You're balancing throttle, balancing the brake pedal as you release it, and balancing the steering wheel. It is probably the most challenging corner on the track.
Oh, Pato O'Ward in the gravel. So 2 of the 3 Arrow McLaren cars have had an off-track excursion.
It's down in turn 5, Diff. That downhill brake zone can be so tricky. Any downhill braking is just so much more challenging, especially as the weight of an Indy car is, creeped up over the years. You see that black line getting laid down by the brakes locked up. A little trip to the beach.
Have a listen to this.
It's the rear tires that were locked up. That's why it gets all crossed up there. You can almost hear the engine note completely die as he has locking in the back of the car. Dylan, what do you know about the number 5?
Well, they've been in the pits a couple times here. They were down here most recently just making a damper change, so not sure if that issue that we just saw is related at all to maybe a lack of feel that Pato has in the back of the race car. But keep in mind, they tested here. Arrow McLaren tested here. Alexander Rossi and Callum Ilott, who was in the 6 car, were near the top of the charts most of the test session. And Pato was pretty good, but he crashed at the end of the test session. So they felt like they had a pretty good understanding based on their teammates of what they needed to do here. But they've made a couple changes already, and obviously an off-road excursion here early in this session.
You gotta push it now, though, right? I mean, this is a team and a driver that know how to be quick here, and even with all the changes they're making, the lap time is still very competitive. Pato on the radio there, giving some feedback as he comes up on the back of, I believe that's Marcus Ericsson in the Andretti Global car. Andretti, one of the I believe there's only 2 teams that didn't test here. There was a big test about a month ago. This team, actually, McLaren, 1 and 2 in the test with Alex Rossi and at the time Callum Ilott. But Penske, one of the teams, along with Andretti Global, that didn't test. And you got to say, shots fired from Penske. They're P3, P5, and P7 right now for a team that expected to maybe start the session a little bit on the back foot just because they didn't come in test when majority of the series did. And again, if we're seeing an 80-plus degree day when you've got this aero screen, even with the new vents that they've put in, it's still very hot.
This happened just a moment ago to Scott McLaughlin. Same place as his teammate Joseph Newgarden, but doesn't spin. Able to save it.
That's a big heart in the throat kind of moment there for McLaughlin, because had he overcorrected there or not caught it and spun all the way around, he absolutely would have reached the Armco there just because of how much speed, how much later he was in the corner than when he started to lose it compared to Joseph.
And jumped his way back up to the top with a 107.23 and continues to drop weight. He has shed about 20 pounds since the off-season. He is looking incredibly lean, and he just said, I feel a whole lot better in the car for it. But he's got the biggest workload that he's had, because with that disqualification, Scott McLaughlin is at the bottom of the points table. That's pretty good. Joseph Newgarden, in the light of this disqualification from St. Pete this week, responds emphatically by laying down the quick time of the session. Dylan?
I think it just is a testament to what kind of pro he is. That we saw the spin earlier. We know he's kind of had some sleepless nights this week, as he mentioned in the press conference, and he's still able to go out here and lay down a lap. And I think this is good for a couple of reasons. When I was talking to Joseph a couple weeks ago before the Indianapolis test, he mentioned how this was a place where he specifically and this 2-car wanted to kind of take a step forward and elevate over a year ago. So early signs certainly indicate to some good news there. The other thing he said too was, which I think is interesting in hindsight, he said, we don't want to pick apart the championship after the first round. We just have to stay vigilant every race. We need to score points in every race, and that will just kind of keep us in the hunt throughout the entire year. So obviously that approach takes on added importance now, but that approach has been their approach really every single race this year, regardless of any sort of penalties or anything like that. So they've got some ground to make up, of course, now, but the approach never changes on this 2-car.
Yeah, I mean, the way you make that ground up is just one race at a time. One race at a time, putting in the performances and trying to get those victories. Newgarden betters his time to a 106.7. You noted he was on the reds, he was on the alternates, as was Marcus Ericsson when he did that. So Lundgaard now as well has gone to that. You get one set of alternates to run in first practice only. That's the only time you get to run them before qualifying. And I'm kind of looking at the times to the best primary runners right now. So Scott McLaughlin, a 107.2. Joseph Newgarden, a half second quicker at a 106.7.
Christian Lundgaard's gone to P2, and he needs to in the Hy-Vee Honda. He needs to get a podium this weekend to really get his 24 season started. What happened to the Danish driver? Down in the museum turn. Jumps the curbs, that's normal. Was over that curb. Have a listen to this.
Well, see both front tires locked up. As you hit that curve, the car bottoms out, both front wheels just in the air, and then they land all locked up. Clocking in just under 2/10 below, or above rather, slower than Newgarden's time at the moment. Rahal just about a tenth off of his teammate.
Christian had to suffer the unsafe release penalty last weekend, and that really took him out of the mix, frustratingly so. So it's got to be this weekend for the driver of the Hy-Vee Honda. Here's Will Power heading to turn 5. Have a listen.
Also dealing with rear locking, Diff. One of the things that can throw the drivers for a loop in that corner is wind direction. If the wind is a tailwind heading down into turn 5, added to the fact that it's downhill braking, it can be so challenging to get those cars wound up. And Power, despite the off, manages to get to within a tenth of Joseph Newgarden's time. Penske 1-2 right now. And McLaughlin, who was the fastest runner on the primaries before everybody started switching over, he's on his alternates right now.
show you something that went down with Romain Grosjean just a couple of moments ago.
Yeah, this is
Whoa.
It's so easy at the end of that back straight to just cook it in a little too hot. The car gets light as the track starts to fall away. He was lucky, though. Ran through the grass, managed to end up back on the pavement. But all these drivers look like they've had to back off. So it won't be a representative lap for Rossi on this one. Grosjean's abandoned it. He's got Jack Harvey on an outlap behind him. This is when it all starts getting a bit tough, Dave. There's only 17 cars on track right now, but there are not a lot of gaps on this racetrack.
What went down a little while ago between Jack Harvey and Romain Grosjean.
So Romain through turn one there. Jack fresh out of the pits, sits the car, I guess, right on the racing line, but he's left lots of room to the inside. It's hard for him to predict where Grosjean wants to go in that moment. Oh, that's unnecessary, and then creates that dangerous situation for, I think it was Rossi coming up behind him. Now you see a drag race between Christian Rasmussen and Linus Lundqvist as Christian Lundgaard slides by on the inside. This is going to be the story of it, guys. We say it week in and week out. When you have 27 cars in the series, it is so easy to find yourself tripping over each other.
Final 2.5 minutes coming up for the first practice session of the weekend for the Children's of Alabama Indy Grand Prix. It's been a week dominated by the headlines of Team Penske's, 2 of 3 Team Penske's cars being disqualified from the season opener. The man we ride with lost 10 championship points. But it feels good to be back on track.
So we saw this earlier between Grosjean and Harvey, but look at what Alex Rossi has to do here. He's got to thread the needle over that flat-out blind corner. Like I said, unnecessary move from Grosjean. You know, he's mad at nothing, and he created this situation. And Rossi, I mean, it's sketchy to go on the outside of that corner. It's dirty, and like I said, it's fast. That's where we saw that big pileup occur a few years ago. I think Joseph Newgarden was the first car to drop a wheel on the outside and cause a chain reaction. But heads up from Rossi to stay out of that mess and thread the needle there.
This section here, turns 16 and 17, the last 2 turns on this track, over the last couple of years, we dubbed it the Newgarden move, where he would hug in tight and then grab a position on turn 16. But over the last couple of years, people have gone on to create their own moves, and we showed you earlier with Romain Grosjean where and Lundgaard did it successfully as well, whereas if you just take a little less going into 16 and be able to get on the gas earlier, you can make an inside move on 17.
The 16-17 complex, being a right-left combo, it's all about compromise. However much speed you take into 16 is going to affect what you do in 17. And so there's a car in front of you. Yeah, it's really easy to just launch it in 16 and completely sacrifice your entry for 17, but that can put you with a lot of speed in the inside line on another car. So it's good for passing, bad for lap time, but it really does open up some cool opportunities, and it's been fun watching these guys battle it out and try to explore some more options there.
Joseph Newgarden already helmet off, Hans Device off, Pato O'Ward is second, Will Power third, Colton Herta fourth, Christian Lundgaard fifth, Graham Rahal sixth. Good start to the weekend for 2 of the 3 RLL cars. And then Marcus Armstrong leads the Ganassi gang over Scott McLaughlin, Romain Grosjean, and this man here, Marcus Ericsson, as the seconds wind down for the first official session of the weekend here at beautiful Barber Motorsports Park. Marcus will try and sneak one more in as he can. He's past the time.
What an impressive run, though, from Newgarden. You got to think, with all of the mental anguish and stress that he's been dealing with this week, he admitted in his press conference he hasn't been sleeping the last few nights, so you're physically not in your normal place. Tim Cindric told us they didn't test here. They expected to be on the back foot, but Dylan, that doesn't seem to be the case at all.
Now let's see if we can step in here and grab a word with Joseph. So, I know it's been a trying week, but how good does it feel to just get back in the car and go fast right out of the box?
It's definitely the best medicine in the world, you know, for someone like me, but it was great to be out here. Just good to turn laps, you know. It's a little bit off my game in the beginning for sure. I dropped the wheel and made a mistake and threw away a set of tires, which was unfortunate, but we just kept going. We came up with a new plan, and I think the positive thing is the car was really fast, right away. Even when I made the mistake, I said, I think the car was coming to me there. I felt really good about it. Felt like I had a good read right away. So this team's done a good job. I love being here with a two-car group. They're great at what they do. Give me a lot of confidence. So yeah, I feel good about things.
What is the limit like out there? I mean, it's hot today. Like take us through your spin there and maybe just kind of what happened.
Well, I made an error on how wide I got. You drop a wheel up top there. It can be difficult to save it. Sometimes you do. Sometimes you get lucky and you save it. I didn't save it. I think I just, from a viewing standpoint, I think I just got too wide. I didn't see where I was, and then I was very conscious of it the next time. I went back out. I was like, I'm not going to make that mistake again. At least not immediately afterwards. So I was just trying to watch where I was placing the car. But this track is always on the limit. It's one of my favorites for that. Barber is high speed. You just got to be so good through the corners, committed. Like, cars got to be on the edge to be fast here. You can't really get away with something different. So, I love the challenge of it.
I've heard a couple of people talk that the Reds maybe feel a little softer this weekend. Is that accurate? Is that how you feel?
I don't fully know yet. It's very hot today relative to where we were last year, just track and ambient. And I think even compared to when the other cars were testing here, it's a lot hotter, so that's going to create a very different dynamic. This place changes pretty rapidly with 20-30 degrees. I think the tire in general is different than what it was last year, so I'm not really picking apart the primaries and the alternates just yet. It is softer, it's going to be quicker, but I think it feels similar to the sort of spread to what we had last year.
Thanks, Joseph. Joseph Newgarden, fastest in opening practice here at Barber.
How about this one, Hinch? 19 cars within 1 second. That's the way to get the weekend going.
Absolutely is. I mean, you see that, a 6-7 at the top there, 7-1 at the bottom of the top 10, only 4 tenths in the top 10. Now, what's interesting, you'll see how many drivers you have there in the 6-9s. It's so close. Barber is such a momentum track. It's such a rhythm track. And I think a lot of these drivers will tell you they didn't get into that rhythm in this session, especially on those alternate red tires. You see Alexander Rossi down there in 22nd. His teammate Pato O'Ward is second. This was the guy that led the test here. There's a lot of stories out there of drivers that just didn't get their lap down. You've got Scott Dixon down there as well. So it's you can look a little bit into the lap times, but it's definitely not telling the whole story.